You sound great.
Okay, that's great.
Andrew is just being fancy. I could move mine over, but I'm going to let Andrew just be fancy today.
Unless guys.
Do I need to move it over?
Fake it till you make it. It's all about the appearance.
Smoke and mirrors. I told you. Right? Like,
we are all very aware.
This thing's not even hooked up. I'm just talking about my kids' toys. I took it and used it. Welcome back to Change Ed.
Change Ed. Oh, we said it at the same time. Sorry. Say it again. Sorry, Zoom, Tony.
Changed.
Change it.
That's what happens when we're virtual. The number one rated podcast, although I feel like our guest today wants to challenge that in all of Pennsylvania, except for Whitehall Coplay. Hold on, except for Whitehall Coplay, because they have a number one rated podcast there. Is that right?
Copley.
See?
I hate that name. Except for Whitehall Coplay, because I feel like they have a number one rated podcast there as well. And they're here to challenge us today. Challenge accepted. I'm Andrew Kuhn, your favorite host on your favorite podcast. And you know what? Honestly, I'm just a person who loves education and loves learning. I'm a lifelong learner. And here with me is...
I'm Dave Stauffer, once again from Whitehall Coplay School District. I'm the supervisor of teaching, learning, and technology.
I'm Andy Fehnel, one of the K through 12 instructional technology specialists, former social studies teacher here in the district as well.
Please don't leave out your other title.
And I am the current district ambassador of Whitehall Coplay as well.
We're going to unpack that in a little bit.
All right, that's fine.
I'm Tony Pangaio, and I don't have cool, fancy titles like these other guys. I'm just a guy who loves Florida and is a tech coach and coming along for the ride.
Yes, Tony. Florida is back.
Here's what I don't get about this podcast, and we really are going to start. How do we always end up talking about Florida? Every podcast we talk about Florida.
Because people are like, why did you do that? Mickey's amazing. Mm-hmm. And then you talk about it for 4 seconds, and you're like, oh, okay.
That tracks.
I mean, and now you're apparently attracting people who are forced to talk about Florida every day as well, because Tony ties it into everything. So, it's
we did a podcast with Trevor Muir. Have you all familiar with Trevor Muir?
He's big on project-based learning.
Yeah, he's big on project-based learning and storylines and a lot of things. And an international person, down to earth guy, great person to talk to. At the end of it, he's from Florida. They got onto the Florida kick, and it was like I wasn't even in the space. Right? They're talking about alligators and wrestling them and throwing marshmallows, like they were both rehashing their childhood in front of me.
I'm Patrice Semichek. I'm out of the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit, and I'm having a hard time taking Kuhn seriously with his statement about how he's just a guy who loves whatever you said. I zoned out. That was long, but
that was a lot of fluff. Yeah.
He's just a guy. Anyone who's met Kuhn knows he's not just a guy.
And I'm Tony Pangaio from Carbon Lehigh Intermediate Unit. Very excited to talk to Whitehall Coplay School District today, home of Saquon Barkley. Some people say Saquon would not be the man he is today without these three gentlemen that are joining us. So very, very excited.
Listen, that backwards hurdle, that I taught him that. We worked on that 10 years ago.
Dave showed him how to do it in Tecmo. Yeah,
absolutely.
Wait, is there video of that happening? Because I personally would pay solid money to see you do that backwards thing.
No video. You just got to take me at my word.
Okay.
To be fair, Patrice, I would pay a lot of money as well to see
that. Well, as if it's not confusing enough to have a podcast with two podcasting groups, we also decided that we would make the names all very similar. So it was very easy. So if someone says Andrew, fortunately enough, our guest goes by Andy. So that's pretty easy. But we have a Tony and a Tony.
They both have beards, though.
Yeah, right. I show respect to Mr. Pangaio, I would say.
That's Mr. Pangaio.
And Mr. District Administrator, Ambassador, and Mr. Stauffer. That's how I will.
Okay. Well, listen, this is a really
Andrew.
I'm the Andrew. So this is a really unique podcast because the topic that we're going to talk about is very near and dear to us as podcasters, especially at Change Ed. This is how Change Ed started and was created, and the reason that we continue to podcast, and that is micro learning. and micro professional learning and development, and what that looks like on all sorts of levels. So for us at Change Ed, we all work for intermediate units. So our job is to support educators in their work. And so we take it from that lens. However, your podcast, which I'd love for you to tell us more about, is focused on a district level, and I'm working in and supporting your teacher at the district level. So maybe a great starting spot would be, can you tell us about your podcast, maybe a little bit of background about it, and then really what is the focus and intent of your podcast?
Yeah, so why don't we start with the origin? So at Whitehall Coplay, we really pride ourselves in giving our teachers, or I should say our staff members, a lot of choice in their professional learning. And we offer everything from synchronous learning to asynchronous learning to in-person learning classes. We really try to meet them where they're at and provide that choice. So we sat down at the beginning of the year, Andy, Tony, and myself, as we always do. We sit down in August, we review what we're doing, and we have a conversation about how we could do things better and what else we could offer. And at that point, Andy had a great idea. Andy, if you want to start filling in.
One thing that we had kind of knocked around was the idea of a podcast. So at the beginning of the year, when we had that conversation about what to do, it simply was, what about a podcast? What would that look like? Is that something that we could actually pull off? I think it kind of went around the room between the three of us for about a week or two, back and forth. Yeah, we can do it. No, I'm not sure if it's going to work. There were some logistical things that we had to work through, especially from the standpoint of credit and what our teachers would get and how it would work. But ultimately, we decided that it was worth the effort and that we'd give it a shot. Once we kind of started the ball rolling, it just kind of took off.
Yeah, so I think the credit piece is really important to mention. So our teachers, they do have required professional learning hours outside of their contractual day. For next year, they'll have to put in 20 additional hours. So when we talked about varied options in professional learning, whether it's synchronous, asynchronous classes, or in-person classes, by attending or completing those activities, they do earn credit. So when we first started talking about the podcast, we weren't even necessarily talking about it for professional learning and professional learning credit. We were just talking about putting out a podcast, sitting down, having some conversation, and using it as a great way to disseminate information to our staff members. And Tony Pangaio, if you want to hop in, he really drove the conversation of, is there a better way that we can entice listeners?
Yeah, to be honest, I just didn't think anybody would listen to us. Andy and I.
That's how I feel about Andrew, but go ahead. Sorry, Tom.
Andy and I have been in this district for a while. I've been in the longest. So we have valuable information that we feel teachers can learn from, and they listen to us, as we walk around, but I still didn't think we would hook them unless there was a piece. So,
Right.
The piece that they can get credit, they'll listen to our podcast, which is about 10 minutes or so, and then they kind of fill out a reflection form and give us their thoughts. And I felt like that piece was important for a couple of reasons. A, to give them credit so they had some value in it, but B, it allows us to follow up with them, and it gives us a secret into their class. As tech coaches, it's always hard to get into classes sometimes. Some teachers are resistant. They don't know what that looks like, the co-planning, etc. Dave actually goes through their feedback the most and then shares it with us and says, hey, can you check on this teacher? Can you check on that teacher about something we talked about in our podcast? And it gives us that built-in connection. So I think those two things are really important that drive that popularity of what we do.
That's interesting. So I'm interested in, how are you tracking that? Like, are they filling out a form after they watch?
Yeah.
So that's giving them credit for the amount of time they listen.
Yeah, absolutely. I could talk through the nuts and bolts of it. We have a system called Frontline that we use for tracking hours. So I created a form on Frontline. It's a very basic reflection form. It's used for all podcast episodes. It has 3 questions. They're very open-ended questions where they reflect on the episode. So once they fill out the form, it comes to me for approval. And I, of course, read through every form. And once I hit approve that, okay, this form looks good, then it automatically credits them a half hour into their account. So having Frontline for us really is very helpful in this situation.
I love it. Thanks.
What I like about that component is you added in a piece of accountability. So someone can say, oh yeah, I listened to it, right? Or I listened and they heard the beginning and they're like, oh, it's great that you talked about X, and they actually don't have any content. We feel very fortunate that we have a number of listeners that we talk to, and they'll go into depth about it. Actually, one of them was a guest on our show, and they'll be like, oh man, when you said this, and they react, you can tell they're a listener. So it's, they can like talk about the show and actually what's happening. But the piece that I wanted to jump on that you were talking about earlier is that it's such an amazing window and relationship that you can create create with your listeners. We feel a commitment to them, but also we even had scenarios where someone came in there was a student event that we were running at our intermediate unit, and they came in. We never met them. They walked into the room. They're like, "Are you Andrew and Patrice?" Like, when I heard you guys talk,
it was so
I heard your
weird.
voice. I'm like, I barely said anything, but like, just you connect, right? Like when you hear that a lot, or you hear someone's voice, that they can connect. So, have you seen an impact in your relationship with your educators that you work with at the school as a result of the podcast?
Oh, absolutely. Teachers that were walking through buildings, and just the other day, I was in, like a faculty room, and somebody heard me talking, walked in, and immediately just struck up a podcast conversation. I listened to you last night when I was cooking dinner, and it was about X, Y, and Z. And then for about 5 minutes, we bounced some ideas back and forth about that podcast, where I think if the podcast wasn't there, I'm not sure that teacher would have the confidence to connect in that way. It was that avenue that allowed her to come in and feel comfortable to strike up a conversation with me, and off we went.
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest things about the podcast has been just the feedback that we get from people constantly. Yes, there's definitely people we connect with on a regular basis. And there are, like Tony said, there are those people that we're in a district with 380 plus teachers. You just don't connect with everybody on a regular basis. But to be able to get into buildings and walk past people, walk past classrooms, see people even outside in the community. And the first thing they say to you is like, "Hey, I just want to thank you for the podcast," right? It's so easy for me to listen to it in the car on the way in, on the car on the way home. One of the things that we really kind of came to the conclusion early on as we were recording the first few episodes was we needed to keep it super authentic, and it needed to be us. And in our kind of bubble of the three of us, Dave is the serious one. Dave is the guy who keeps us on track. Dave keeps us organized. Dave kind of drives where we're headed. And Tony and I are just kind of like the class clowns at times. And so it was really important for us to make sure that Dave kept his organization and that things went the way they did, but that Tony and I got an opportunity to kind of joke around a little bit, goof around a little bit, and show that personality that we have. And I think that's really resonated with people. And that builds on what he was talking about, that authenticity of what we're saying and how we're saying it. And it's not coming across as an edict or, do this, do that. It really is a conversation, and it's something that they can engage in just by listening.
When we started, we were trying to think of a title, and we wanted to keep it a short podcast. We didn't want to go on and on for a half hour or an hour. So we settled on the title 10 minutes or less. So the first couple episodes, we called it the 10 minutes or less podcast. And what's really funny is after a few episodes, we realized 10 minutes or less wasn't necessarily realistic for us. We were coming in around 11 or 12 minutes. So the 10 minutes or less podcast became the 10 minutes or so podcast. Which it is now called 10 minutes or so. Awesome. But it is exactly that, as Andy said. So I do serve as the host of the podcast, and Andy and Tony, they sit with me occasionally. We've had some guests in, but honestly, it's a very organic conversation. So in my planning, of course, I have a topic for the day, and I have a couple guiding questions, and we really just sit down and we have a conversation. And when people ask me when I'm walking around the halls about our podcast, they can't believe when I tell them that we've never restarted an episode. So we've never started and said, this isn't working, right? We always sit down, we record in one take and just let it happen. If we misspeak, if something goes wrong, we laugh about it, we make fun of each other, and then we just move on. So it's sitting down. And if it's a 12-minute podcast, it takes us 12 minutes to record. So it is an internal podcast. We don't release it on Apple Podcasts or any of the major platforms. What I do with it is I take it and I upload to our Google Drive, and then I just protect it within our Whitehall Coplay domain. So currently it's only available to our staff members. I've created a 10 minutes or so website where all those episodes live. Each episode gets its own page where I have a breakdown minute by minute of what we're talking about. And I also put in some supporting resources as well. So those episodes are always there for our staff members to go and grab and listen to. When we do a release of a new episode, Andy shoots it out. We have a description and, sends it to the entire district that, hey, check out the new episode of the 10 minutes or so podcast.
As we travel and go to different conferences, people are talking about podcasts because it's a great medium to connect with others for all the reasons that we've explained and shared and more, I think the one that is the strongest for me is that it opens doors for communications. So Tony had shared that he was having a conversation with a teacher where otherwise you might have both been in that space and that conversation just wouldn't have happened. So you had thoughts on the topic, they had thoughts on the topic. So it creates a scenario where you can have that conversation. And that's always our desire for this as well. But the part that I love so much about this is that you're doing it at a district level, because whenever we go somewhere, they're talking about doing it, teachers doing it with students, and they're doing it at a classroom level, which is hugely important. I mean, the impacts are all the same. You're creating an environment for that conversation. It happens at whatever level you're focusing on, but the strength in this, and I think other district leaders are going to be very interested in something like this and even replicating and modeling this, is because, again, you can reach your intended audience differently. So you can connect with your district no matter the size, how big or how small. It's all math. Okay, if it's smaller, you have less staff to support. If it's larger, you have more staff. And in all ways, communication is king in what we're doing. And the other thing I really appreciate is how you talked about that authenticity, because I know my kids want to be something famous, whether it's YouTube or any of the talks or the ticks or the, whatever it might be. And they're like, what can I do? And actually what I challenge them, don't try to go for something that's already out there. Look for the next thing. Like, be you and look for the next thing. Don't try to duplicate and replicate what someone's already doing. Try to be, whatever that next thing is. And interesting enough, I can see a lot of similarities in the podcast and the dynamics and how it works. And yet there are significant differences, but we're all being authentic. And I think that's what relates to other people, that we're just actually being who we are, not trying to be someone different.
And Andrew, just to chime in here, I'm glad you brought up authenticity, and I'll let the guys chime in as well. There's definitely an evolution if you would listen to our episodes. So we're 20 episodes in. The first couple episodes, we are, I would say, a lot more serious than we are in the final, say, 17 or so. We're just getting our feet wet, and we're a little more business. And what we realized pretty quickly was we have to be ourselves, right? We have to have fun doing it. That's what we want. That's what our listeners want. And there is definitely more and more fun that goes on as the episodes go on. What we started doing, I want to say around episode 4 or 5, we open up every single conversation with an icebreaker. And that icebreaker generally has nothing to do with education. Well, Tony, Andy, what's a couple examples of an icebreaker?
Favorite restaurant?
Oh,
favorite, or what superpowered would you want?
Oh yeah, favorite superpower. Yeah, that was a good one.
What was your favorite cartoon growing up? What was your favorite television show? I've found that that's such a great way to kick off the podcast. Minute icebreaker, minute and a half of laughing and talking a little bit of nonsense. From that icebreaker, we go into a tip of the day. So one of the three of us will share a tip of the day. So it'll be just a 1-minute quick hitter tip of something that we think our listener will find really helpful. And then from there, we go into our main topic of conversation.
I really like how you guys are also having conversations around giving teachers some autonomy in their choices of professional learning. So the fact that Mirabito and Kuhn and I are all in professional learning, the thing that we do all day is professional learning, but we were finding that the more people can choose to come to something, the more engaged they're going to be naturally. And a lot of districts that we work with have very scripted days. Like, we're talking about this day, and this day, and this day. And we have no time for anything else, especially with the diminishing of time that people have in terms of professional learning in most of the teachers' contracts. So how did you guys as a district, and I don't know if any of you were involved in that part, but how did you guys as a district make the decision to give them 20 hours of their own learning time, and then managing what does that look like and expectations for that? I think a lot of you should be interested in hearing that.
Yeah, so that's been a contractual evolution over the years.
Oh, I'm sure.
So certainly for quite some time, they had a 5-hour requirement. It was 5 hours outside of their normal contract. Mm-hmm. And what we instituted a few years ago were trade days. So they had 5 hours of required time, and then they had 3 days that they could trade out of. So you could choose to come to work, and we would have professional learning on that day, or you can earn 5 hours, and those 5 hours would then get you out of that trade day, right? So that's how we evolved from that 5 hours that was here from the the time that I arrived here at the district 12 or so years ago. And that 5 hours then evolved into that 20 through that true day process.
So Tony and I have been in our roles for about 4 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Previously, it was Dave by himself. Once we went from a department of 1 to a department of 3, one of our first conversations together was, how do we expand the professional development options that are available to our staff? And it tied in kind of nicely with the end of COVID and all of the asynchronous options that we had to present and we had to create through that time period. So obviously the first thought was, well, we can present asynchronous classes for our staff. And from there, it just kept rolling. You know, Dave said earlier, it's every year it's a conversation. What can we do? How are we meeting them? Are things working? Are they not working? How can we evolve? How can we change? As a district over the last 4 years, really made a concerted effort to go to a choice PD model to give our staff an opportunity, even on those days where we're in person for professional development, taking a half a day and having 2 sessions in the morning or 2 sessions in the afternoon where staff have multiple opportunities to go to different sessions and learn based on what is appropriate for them and what they feel is going to benefit them the most. And so it's really given us as creators an opportunity to allow others to create, allow other voices to be raised, and allowed that authenticity level of everything we do professional development wise within the district. It's increased it, you know, and it's given everybody a buy-in and some shared responsibility for what we're trying to do.
I love that.
Yeah. And I think there's a human element to it as well. When you're talking about doing hours outside of your normal workday, we certainly realize that everybody has a life outside of here. We have staff members with young kids and other responsibilities. And if we were only offering courses that occurred in person after school, that could be a significant burden to many of our staff members. Now, we have a lot of staff members that prefer learning in that method. Others that is not necessarily an option for them. And to provide them with options, yes, we have asynchronous courses where if they like to go home and sit in front of a computer and watch a video, that's available. But the podcast is just an enhancement of that. You can be on your commute to work in the morning. You could earn professional learning credit by listening to our podcast. You know, I would say that's what our staff members have loved the most. And we hear that over and over. You know, hey, I was listening to you on the way to work today. It's so convenient. This is so great.
I have a creative process question for you. So how do you choose your topics? Are you getting some teacher input? Is that something that you're doing, you know, month by month? You want to cover certain ideas? And then how often are you releasing your pod?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. So we do take input from our staff members, from our administrative team. And part of it is just us sitting down and brainstorming. What conversations have we heard over the past week or 2 or month? What's a hot button topic in education? We've done a bunch of episodes on AI, which of course is pretty much in every conversation of the past 2 or 3 years.
I'll add to that too, kind of ties into everybody's points here. I've been in the district. I started my teaching career here 26 some years ago. Andy's been in a dozen years. So it adds to that authenticity, that realness that we've lived kind of both sides of the fence. So we've been through the PD that we just sit there and we wanted to change that when we came into this role. Andy and I are in and out of classrooms. So the topics, Tony, for you, we see what's going on. We know those teachers from being colleagues with them years ago and now in our roles currently. So we have a not the best pulse, but a pretty good pulse of what's going on. So we know what they want to hear. We know what they want us to talk about. And we know and understand their struggles with certain things. We understand their strengths. So that helps us kind of piece all of that together and hopefully deliver something that's worth it to them.
Yeah, I love that. I would be interested into seeing some of the data, like what are your most downloaded topics? Like what are teachers most interested in and kind of grow it from there.
One of the other benefits of this media or any media, thinking outside the box as you all are doing when it comes to professional learning, is that access is always an issue. So if something comes up on the day of an in-person training and I can't be there, I just don't get that training. Someone can share their slides with me, but if I didn't create the slides, I might have a hard time interpreting them. Certainly with the way that we do slides, they're mainly pictures. So, although a picture's worth 1,000 words, I might not be able to get all the words that you were intending for me to pick up from that slide. And what's great about this medium is, as you were saying, Dave, that you could be in any part of your life and just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to think about this. It allows you to reflect as a human and as a professional and make the connections you want to versus with all-day trainings, you're drinking from a fire hose and there's probably a lot of good nuggets, but you have to pick out what nugget you want to latch onto and what's the one thing you think of when you leave after a 4-hour session on something versus 10 minutes or so, to reference what you talked about, Tony, where then the reflection had happened and a teacher wanted to engage in further dialogue and then you're stretching each other. You're learning as you do it, which I think is the biggest benefit for us. We'd love to sit down and talk to people and ask them the questions that I want to ask them when I hear them presenting or sharing or talking. Let me really ask you more in-depth questions. I really want to understand this topic. So that love for learning, I think, is important. I'm going to offer you all a gift, and Tony can say that this is a special for Whitehall Coplay.
Coplay. No, you keep doing it.
Coplay.
You got all excited about
Copley?
your pronunciation.
Copley, yeah.
That is the worst trick you all. Anyway, the place that you work, it's a special treat for the place that you work. We're going to give you the second, the third, and the fourth final thought. Give you each an opportunity to kind of give a final thought when it comes to professional learning, the podcast, what you've been experiencing, what you've learned, what you're getting from other people, for our hundreds of millions of listeners that, this is the takeaway that they would want.
I'll go first. For me, when I took this job, it was meeting teachers and meeting their needs and remembering what it was like or what it is like to be in the classroom. I like the short bits. I like the fact that they can get a taste of something, and if they like it, they can follow up with us. And now a 10 minutes or so professional development could turn into an hour or so with me or Andy working with them. Or if they take what we are talking about and it's not applicable to them, they can throw it to the side and say, hey, that was 10 minutes, and they can go off and do something important to them. So that's what I love the most.
I'll jump in next. My biggest takeaway is it's the challenge of trying something new. I think back to when I first got into education and I first took on that challenge of presenting in front of my colleagues or presenting in front of other people and getting over that fear of people are going to look at you and think like, why are you telling me this? You've only been teaching for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is. And I think when we took this on, I know Tony and I both had that hesitancy to go like, are people really going to listen to us? Or like, do we have enough understanding, information, value to what we're trying to do here for other people to listen, take something from it, and then hopefully utilize it or pass it along. And I'll give Dave credit for this. He, stalwart through the entire kind of creation process was like, you guys know, understand, and have more value than you give yourselves credit for. And the more we talk about these things, the more we get it out there, the more people are going to listen and the more people are going to really take away things from it. And I think it was his positivity. And if you know Dave, Dave is one of the most positive people you will ever meet in your life. So I think that positivity on top of the fact that Tony and I realized like we do have a lot of value. We have a lot of knowledge. We have a lot we can share with people. And it's not that difficult for Dave to simply say, here's what we're talking about. Okay, here we go. For us to sit there and find enough information and enough things to say to make it worthwhile for our listeners.
Yeah, for me, my biggest takeaway is the power and popularity of the podcasting medium. Honestly, when Andy first brought it up, I was a bit of a naysayer as well. Me and Tony, I wasn't so sure that anybody was going to listen, and I hadn't considered how popular podcasts are and how many people in our district listen to podcasts on a daily basis. Sometimes you just get stuck in your ways. Yes, we try to innovate constantly, but you think about the old ways of sending out information, sending emails or putting newsletters together. And honestly, I had thought about podcasting over the years, but hadn't truly considered it as something that would be successful within our district. And I'm astounded every single day on the popularity and the traction of the 10 minutes or so podcast.
When it comes to voice and choice, that's something that our students, all students, have figured out by the way that they live their lives and the options they have available. For instance, when they watch YouTube and they have shorts now, they can keep on moving if they're not interested, or they can watch that second play and be like, that was really good. I want to learn more. But the shorts are limited to how long they are, and it's only so much time, and you got to get your point across. And it removes a lot of the fluff. It takes a lot out, and you're like, let's get to the heart of the conversation. Let's really, what is our listener looking for? What do they want? Which leads me to the fact that this is a community. podcasting is a broader community, but then your audience becomes more than an audience of listeners. It really becomes, when we sit down and we plan and we think about what we're going to do, or even when we edit, we have them in mind. What do they want to actually hear? Because we can't put in everything. We've had a 40-minute conversation at this point, and we have to narrow things down. So what do they want to hear from us that will add value to them and the work that they're doing? Well, I have two other things. Number one, I just got to throw this out. Andy, I could tell you were an idea guy from the beginning. I think it's in the name. That's what I think it is. It's all in the name. Our parents knew we were going to be idea people, and they just gave us these really strong names.
There's a reason the kingliness comes from that Andrew name. So
no.
I'm so glad somebody else said it, not me, on this podcast. Thank you, sir.
Oh, how
No
do you guys? I mean, I swear, if your Andrew is anything like our Andrew, I'm sorry.
But the last thing, and actually the most important thing that I want to talk about, is something that's so important to us in education, yet we don't always know how to capture that. And when you're talking in terms of professional learning, how do we gather data? How do we know if someone's interested in what we're talking about? When we're done at the end of a full day, we'll put out surveys and we'll get them back. And, it depends on how it works and what information they'll give us. But we actually have our own barometers that we figured out that are more qualitative, not quantitative. But when you're a podcaster, you can gather so much data. And it's like, I'm so excited about data. We've recently moved into this realm where we can tell when people are binge listening to our podcast. You just see all the numbers go. We get so excited about that. But there's so many things to celebrate when you're doing this work. Again, because we said we're lifelong learners. We get excited about guests that we have. We also get excited about, when an episode explodes, or when, like we said, someone's been listening to us, or we get these opportunities to start work with people who we might never have had the opportunity to do that. So it does open doors, like we said before, not just for communication, but for learning and for gathering information and saying, is this working? Is it not working? Here's how we know that it is or isn't, or it's growing or it's not growing. What do we need? We can analyze and we can talk about things and we can make shifts. So I applaud your work and I applaud what you're doing. It sounds like you've got the right formula to be the second best podcast in Pennsylvania. So we appreciate you coming on and again, doing that work within your district. I think these conversations are needed, and authenticity is something that we need all the time across the board. So with that in mind, we're going to say thank you, Whitehall Coplay.
Yeah.
Just took an hour for coming on the show. We challenge Whitehall, wherever you are in Pittsburgh, to come on the show and talk to us about something so we can be an equal representation for all the Whitehalls in Pennsylvania. For all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in, as always, for sharing your input. Please keep sending that feedback. We want to hear from you as well. We want to make sure that the show continues to be relevant and meaningful to you, and make sure that you like and follow the #1 rated podcast in all of Pennsylvania, Change Ed. And tell me again, it's Whitehall. What I want to say the name right.
Whitehall Coplay.
Coplay.
Yeah, Coplay, spelled like Coplay, but it's Coplay.
Coplay. I am so glad you said that.
Yeah,
that's okay. It's Dutch. It's Pennsylvania Dutch pronunciations. That's it's backwards. It's fine.
Hey, I love that being in Pennsylvania, especially when phonics is an issue. It's like, oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, right. And we always differentiate because there's another Whitehall in Pennsylvania. Yeah. There's Whitehall Baldwin, which I didn't know that. It's south of Pittsburgh.
Talking about
it's out west Pittsburgh.
They don't even listen to us, so we won't even mention them.
I mean, maybe if we tag them, they might.
There you go.